Yeah, it's December 28th, a Thursday, 10 degrees above zero right now. And welcome to the Bird's Eye View, where we could talk about just about anything under the sun. And sometimes we get hot news on cold days. And today we have David Haeg in the studio. David's been our guest before. He is hot news right now. David's odyssey of decades now reached certainly an absolutely new twist just 10 days ago when, he had a status hearing in Anchorage that went sour. And we'll be discussing that and other things. But one of the points I've been telling David, we need to try and get something like an odyssey. Odysseus, I think, was lost for 10 years, bouncing from island to island in monsters and losing his crew members. And David's been on a longer odyssey than Odysseus. And I don't think Craig Medred did a better job than anybody could have in his encapsulation of David's, he calls it Haeg's Hell. If you haven't read it, do it. You can get it up on your computer right now if you're listening to us at home, something you can do later. Medred has done a good job. Love him or hate him. Craig Medred, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, has done David Haeg some justice here, and I would say in a very fair and even-handed way. So, David, welcome to the Bird's Eye View. How are you these days? Are you still full of vim and vigor and fight?
Oh, yeah. Doing fine. And I guess I'd like to, first of all, thank everybody that's been supporting us and calling and, sending messages on Facebook and calling, texting, emailing. I couldn't have ever imagined that we'd get that much support.
You got it from all over the country, didn't you?
Yeah, there's people in other countries contacting us, calls from Hawaii, New York, basically all across the U.S. So,
how many people have seen the video of you being tased? I believe over 500,000. Have you kept keeping track?
I haven't. We tried to figure out how many, and it's hard because there's different formats now that it's been. But we know that people that have become aware of it or whatever and actually done something is approaching 1 million. And I don't know if that's 1 million views of it, but people that have contacted. And of that, like close to 1 million, half of them have actually taken action, either wrote back or liked, and they say that that's about unheard of, that when somebody sees a post, that they'll actually do something rather than just read it and move on. So,
David,
anyway,
I'm going to ask you this because you had a very tough time getting to Anchorage on the 18th because of a landslide, a very unusual event. I can't remember when I know there've been rock slides, but this one closed the road, and it forced you. Did you double back and go to Girdwood to hire a ski copter?
Yeah, we went back and actually the news station here should like this. A very good friend of mine, longtime friend, it's Jeremy Davis, which is the son of John Davis, flew down with his PA-12 from Birchwood, I think it was, picked up my wife and one daughter because they were nervous about a helicopter. And me and my other daughter and one daughter's boyfriend got in a helicopter from Alpine Helicopters there in Girdwood and flew up, and they dropped us at Merrill Field, and then had some other people come pick us up.
There's a landing strip in Girdwood. You could have had a plane come pick you up.
Well, Jeremy came in a PA-12, in a land plane, in a PA-12,
right, and
picked him up, but his plane could only haul 2, and we were running out of time, and they had helicopters there, so
all right,
we had a helicopter ride.
So,
and I guess, I don't know, I should post that on Facebook now that you mention it. I haven't, but we took some pictures.
It's just another little wrinkle in your odyssey. So as we move through that right now, all right, one of the things that I have, and of course, the day this happened, I was on my phone and contacting Doreen Lorenz of KSRM News, and she had it on within an hour and a half, 2 hours afterwards, and then we spent a lot of time, which you did not hear, the following day when I was back on the show. But one of the things, David, that people should realize is that there was no need to clear you from the court. You could have been permitted to simply turn around. The bailiffs and other security folks could have just left you alone, could they not? There was really no imminently arriving next case for courtroom 601.
No, there was a docket, and we actually now on our Facebook page, somebody was thoughtful enough to take a picture of it. The next case was 3 hours after mine. So mine started at 12:30, and the next case started at 3:30 p.m., I think. And what I want everybody to know is that the remand from the Court of Appeals that resulted in this hearing, and it was a status hearing, the remand took out items that would prove that my conviction is invalid, has to be overturned. And if they want to try me again, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind going to trial and having a fair shot at it. But by God, I'm not going to accept a trial that is unfair, where they falsify evidence and threaten people. And
what people should know is that you were advised by your lawyers to make a plea bargain, and you trusted your lawyers, and you only later then believed that they were compromised.
Yeah, and now, years and years later, they've testified that the reason why they didn't defend me is because the state would harm them and their businesses if they did. And then you understand why they said that, I couldn't use as a defense that I was shooting the wolves exactly where the state told me to. Couldn't use as a defense that they'd moved all the evidence to my guide area to charge me as a guide. Couldn't use, all these innumerable things that would have prevented me from being convicted. Or had I went to trial, it would have been a wolf control program violation and not a big game violation, which would have made all the difference in the world.
When we come back, we're going to read the first few opening paragraphs of Craig Medved's article on David Haeg. It's 10 degrees, 317 on the Bird's Eye View.
This is KSRM.
Bob Bird and Hugh Nelson doing some errands for us right now. And in the studio is David Haeg, whose case has received now worldwide attention. And we're going to read from the Anchorage Daily News. It's renamed that again. Craig Medved's article, Haeg's Hell. And David, apparently Medved was at the hearing. I don't know him. And Mr. Brumall thinks he was. So,
okay. Well, I didn't know. I didn't see him there, but I was otherwise occupied. And
yeah,
Craig Medved used to be a reporter for the Anchorage Daily News. Now I think he has his own blog website reporting things. So I don't think he's any affiliated with the Anchorage Daily News any longer.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Okay. In any case, I'll read the opening paragraphs here. To understand why a small mob of law enforcement officers converged on the state courthouse in downtown Anchorage Monday, this was December 18th, to head off what looked to be a simple hearing that was rapidly heading towards a full-scale riot, you have to go back more than a decade in time to some dead wolves and track forward to the crazy saga of David Haeg. Haeg is a man who, after years of dwelling on a questionable conviction of aerial hunting, came into a courtroom looking for some form of justice, only to end up face down on the floor with 6 court officers on top of him in front of a crowd of screaming supporters and his sobbing daughter. He was then tased, handcuffed, led off to jail. How many times were you tased?
We looked at the marks on my leg and back, and we think it's about 10.
We discussed extensively here that tasing is, there's 1,000 people have been killed by tasing. It is not a harmless, non-lethal weapon in the hands of the users. And in fact, it's being used way too liberally. This only begins to capture the craziness of a story about state officials who might or might not have lied, of a state court judge who might or might not have conspired to convict an innocent man, and of a man who in some ways never really grew up. At the center of all this is Haeg, a 51-year-old who never got past that stage we all go through in childhood, where we think life should be fair. It is not. At some point in time, it wrongs all of us, and Haeg got kicked in the gut. I think that's what he means by you never grew up. There's a certain innocence that we all like to hold on to, David. I'm afraid I'll be in that same boat with you. Back in 2004, Haeg helped gun down some wolves in central Alaska because he thought that was what the state wanted. In fact, the state approached you, didn't they?
Yep.
They approached you because you were a master guide with a sterling reputation.
Yep. They said that I was one of the best pilots and best hunters in the state, and gave me a permit and told me where to go kill the wolves, and I killed the wolves, and this has never been disputed, exactly where the state told me to.
Okay, we'll move on, and we'll ask you to interject, or I will ask you a question. A year earlier, the Alaska Board of Game had approved a predator control program calling for aerial wolf hunts, but this exploded quickly into a public relations nightmare. Outside animal rights activists threatened a tourism boycott. Howl-ins were organized in major U.S. cities as a form of protest. And, of course, whatever minuscule numbers of people showed up, they will get the cooing and front-of-the-line support of the mainstream media. In Alaska, the wolf wars have taken a sobering turn for the worse, said the New York Times. In nearly 20,000 square miles of the state, it is now legal for private citizens to shoot wolves from airplanes and helicopters. In one district, the limit has been increased from 10 wolves a year to 10 wolves a day. In these districts, the new regulations call for an 80% temporary reduction in the wolf population. But a reduction on that scale is merely likely to be the first step towards the total elimination of wolves. Now, that's the New York Times editorial. With the country's most influential news organizations expressing such views, Alaskan tourism businesses were near panic and put pressure on Governor Murkowski to do something. The Game Board in Alaska is a quasi-independent entity, and the wolf control program had the support of a significant number of Alaskans. Let's stop there, David, and talk about who was supporting it. Which Alaskans?
Well, the ones that supported it most were the people in rural Alaska that depend on game for feeding their families.
That will not get the sympathy of the mainstream media when the headline should read, Alaska's natives running out of meat. See, it all depends how you want to frame a headline. They wouldn't have done that. And, of course, you had your own interest because you're a big game guy. But that's fine. All right. So, no politician in his right mind would want to wade into that quagmire, and there was an easier political path, a path that emphasized the wolf control program wasn't a project run amok, but a carefully monitored program to control wolves in limited areas of the state where they were harming moose and caribou populations. So enter Haeg, a big game pilot and guide. He and his friend Tony Zellers applied for and obtained a state permit to shoot wolves in the kill zone and Game Management Unit, we'll say it GMU, 19D, an 8,000 square mile area surrounding the community of McGrath on the north and the Alaska Range in vast central Alaska. Both Haeg and the state agree on this. Haeg and Zellers shot 9 wolves. You thought it was less, I thought.
Yeah.
Why did they give you credit for 9?
Well, it may have been 9. I mean,
it's been so long. Yeah, you thought 7,
yep.
But it's not a huge number. It's not like it's 68 wolves or something out there in the tundra. All right. The agreements pretty much end there. The state eventually charged Haeg with shooting the wolves 80 miles outside of the boundary of the kill area. After the charges were levied, Haeg was portrayed as a rogue, out-of-control hunter violating the rules for a closely controlled state program. Now, I want to talk about the word, Hugh, listen to this. I got a word for you, Hugh. You know what the term caricature means?
No.
Okay. Have you ever seen a political cartoon that exaggerates the features of somebody?
Yeah.
Okay. Make the head actually bigger than the body, but it actually looks natural when it's a political cartoon or something.
Usually.
Yeah. And so a caricature is a cartoon that exaggerates someone's features, which may or may not be complimentary. Got that?
Gotcha.
All right. So what they've done here is that they want to create a caricature that the state is slamming down on rogue hunters and guides. That's the caricature. And David was their victim. The portrayal fit nicely with the state's intent to make it appear it was maintaining close oversight on its wolf control program. Haeg contends a state fish and wildlife trooper helped promote the rogue hunter image by doctoring maps to make it appear he had gone far outside the aerial wolf kill zone. And more than that, Haeg argued that he had been doing what the state wanted. The best evidence is the wolves were shot 20 to 30 miles outside the control boundary, but well within GMU 19D, the unit in which Fish and Game wanted to reduce wolf numbers. And there is no doubt the state wanted these wolves dead in GMU 19D. Feeling unfairly prosecuted, Craig sought the help of attorney Brent Cole. Now, David, let me ask you this. At this point now, you're one of the key elements of your case is that the boundaries were drawn incorrectly and intentionally for the jurors to see. Is that correct?
That's correct. What the state did, and it was 8 years after trial we found this, and I have a bone to pick with that also because we filed a discovery request before trial, so we should have got a copy of the map, and we should have got a copy of the meeting in which the trooper and prosecutor were talking about the map being doctored, but we never did until 8 years after. And what they did is they took the boundary between Game Management Unit 19D and Game Management Unit 19C, and I guided in C. They took, and although the wolves were killed in 19D, they took and altered the boundary with a big loop to loop in and encompass the wolves so they could say that I was taking them in my guide area when in fact they were not.
Yeah, in fact, you
and
were
the
not.
state's own GPS coordinates proved that.
And that's the evidence they're not admitting.
Correct.
All right, there you go, folks. We're going to continue this after ABC News. It's 10 degrees on the one KSRM.
Welcome back to the Bird's Eye View on KSRM and streaming online at RadioKenai.com.
Bob Bird back here with David Haeg, Hugh Nelson on this clear, cold, late December day in Alaska's fabulous Kenai Peninsula. And we're going through David's odyssey here with a lot of help. I want to give him credit. Craig Maidred, and who is no longer with the ADN, I should point out. And I have to tell you, David, I'm constructing something similar. But I don't think I can do a better job than Mr. Medred right now from what I've been looking at. And did he interview you personally at all since the last week?
No. Well, I'll take that back. I called him to see if he could attend the hearing, but that's about all the conversation we had.
Yeah, he didn't see you afterwards.
Yep. No.
Okay, so he's done a great service here. I'm continuing here about Brent Cole and the let's say lifelong Alaskan. Cole once oversaw the prosecution of fish and wildlife violations for the state. After he went into private practice, he became well known as a legal fixer. He has a reputation as an attorney adept at settling cases. when rich and influential Alice Rogoff, the publisher of the state's largest newspaper, botched a float plane landing, clipped a tree, almost killed a bald eagle, crashed into the waters of Halibut Cove. She called in Cole to help clean up the mess. He saw to it that state troopers who arrived on the scene shortly after the crash never got to talk to Rogoff about what happened or make her blow a breath test as they would after a motor vehicle accident. What else transpired is unknown, but Rogoff managed to hang on to her pilot's license despite a very public demonstration of questionable skills. She did temporarily lose her float plane landing. Unfortunately for both Haeg and Cole, Haeg is not a settling kind of guy. Haeg did sit through a 5-hour plea agreement interview. Instead of helping settle the case, it did the opposite. Now, inject there, would you please?
Well, and this is where there's more disputes, is I was told I had to go in and give an interview to the state, and there was no plea agreement on the table, and so I did. We went in and talked to the state, and I placed all the wolf kill locations on the map for the state on an aeronautical chart, and told them everything I wanted to know, what airplane, what. The state then uses all that information to charge me with, violations. And I'm like, well, I asked Mr. Cole, I'm like, why did we talk to them if they're just going to use it? And he's like, well, that's the way it is. They can do that. And what really has me upset and why I wanted to get my evidence out is, again, I think it was like 7 years after I'm convicted, I filed fee arbitration against Brent Cole because of him letting the state do all this. And while he's sworn under oath, Brent Cole says, well, David, for that statement, the state gave you immunity. And then he brought in Tony Zeller's attorney, his name's Kevin Fitzgerald, to support Brent when I'm saying, well, how did you let all this stuff go down? And Kevin Fitzgerald testifies under oath that I was given transactional immunity, me and Tony. Well, then later on, and this is more interesting than all, is Kevin also states under oath that after I and Tony had given our statements to prosecutor leaders, Scott Leaders, came up to Brent Cole and Kevin Fitzgerald and said, guess what? We're not going to honor the immunity.
That is huge. I hope our listeners caught that. All right? So I'm going to continue with the Madrid article right now. The state used statements made during that interview to charge Haeg with hunting wolves from the air to benefit his guide business. The argument was that killing wolves reducing predation increases prey populations, and that would increase Haeg's chances for his clients in killing moose, caribou, or Dall sheep. After the latter charges were filed, a state official involved with the seizure of Haeg's airplane told the guy that he'd never get it back. It was then that I realized I wasn't being treated fairly, Haeg told the Clarion reporter Jerzy Shedlock in 2012, and that was an understatement. In 2005, convicted of illegally hunting wolves from the air, he contended District Court Judge Margaret Murphy, Trooper Brett Gibbons, and his own attorneys conspired to convict him. Haeg appealed his conviction, claiming state prosecutors used perjured witnesses and violated the rules of evidence, and that Judge Murphy had prejudiced his defense, among other things. The Alaska Court of Appeals eventually sent the Haeg case back to the lower courts to consider some very limited issues, and it bounced around ever since. So what we're dealing with here, somebody is pulling strings to make you be a sacrificial lamb to pander to the green lobby in the lower 48 to salvage Alaska's tourism. Have you ever, let's try and ask this, David, because if you're saying that the troopers have been compromised and the lawyers have been compromised and the judges have been compromised, some power was behind all of this? Have you formulated any name or idea?
Well, and I won't name his name, but our business attorney, been an attorney here on the peninsula for 35 years, has said, and our trial attorney has said in Alaska, there's a good old boys club. And when prosecutors or troopers do something wrong, basically the judges and everybody else validates what's going on, no matter what they have to do. And you can never get a hearing on what actually happened. And that's what's happening. Now the Court of Appeals has remanded this on limited issues. And they're stating, in essence, I never brought up the false map. And I can prove it was falsified. And then there's a recording of the prosecutor and trooper talking about how they falsified it. They won't let that evidence in. And they basically say, I never brought it up. But I look back through my briefing to the Court of Appeals, and there's page after page after page of me going over it.
David, there's one thing I want people to know, and it has to do with the landslide that kept you from coming, because that courtroom was packed. It was not packed with people from the peninsula. It was packed with people from Anchorage and the Mat-Su Valley, and there's a reason for that, because they have all undergone much of the same good old boys network. Is that not a fair characterization?
That's exactly what happened. Everybody that's contacted me and has a concern is screaming the same thing happened to me. The same thing happened to me, that our own attorneys rolled over on us. The judges don't care. The prosecutors took it to their advantage. And like I said, what I'd like you to do with the Court of Appeals, one issue that they took away from me was my claim and proof that my trial judge, Judge Murphy, was riding around with Trooper Gibbons all during my trial, having meals with him. And the reason was kind of understandable. There is no judges in McGrath. Judge Murphy lived in Antioch. She flew into McGrath. Since there's no public transportation, she had no other way to get around. And so the trooper started running around. Well, the problem is the trooper was the main witness against me. He's the one that falsified all the wolf kill locations into my guide area, into 19C, when in fact they were killed in 19D. And remember, 19D is the area in which the program was occurring. And so it all had a big effect. And then when we filed a complaint about that, and the Alaska Commission on Judicial Conduct investigated it, we have direct evidence that that investigation was falsified to cover up for what the trooper and the judge was doing during my trial. And that's something that I'd like you to read here if you have some time.
Of course we will. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we'll pick up where we left off. It's 10 degrees, 345 on the Bird's Eye View. Bob Bird with David Haeg, who is hot news, not only here in Alaska right now, and it's also a matter of nationwide and even outside the boundaries of the country. And there is a caller coming in right now. We're going to hold on here to that call in just a minute, David, because we'll deal with something that we discussed the day after I got back from your trial. Excuse me, your hearing. I said, there's got to be some sort of ombudsman or provost marshal, and that's a military term, someone who makes sure that the conduct of the courts are following the rules. And that we all know there are such things as corrupt judges. We just don't want to believe it's underneath our noses. It's got to be in Chicago, Los Angeles or someplace like that, right? Well, Judge Alfred Noyes, early in Alaska's gold rush history, is an accepted fact of being a corrupt judge in a mine-jumping case in the Seward Peninsula during the Nome Gold Rush. So it's an old Alaskan tradition. So what I want to ask you is, you sought relief to the person who is, in fact, in charge of looking at judicial conduct, and what happened?
Well, I filed the complaint, and the investigator, her name's Marla Greenstein. She's been the only investigator since 1989 of judges in the state.
That's a long time to be in a job like that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she asked me for a list of witnesses. So I gave her a list of 4 witnesses that I seen what was going on. And anyway, didn't hear from her for about a year. And I finally called her up and I said, whatever happened to my complaint that my trial judge was being chauffeured by the main witness against me while my evidence gets removed out of the court record?
Now let's talk about why that is so important. A trial judge being chauffeured by a witness means what? It's totally,
you tell me.
It's totally improper because there's going to be collusion and suborning of perjury.
Yeah. Well, and one of the big things that happened also, is when the Trooper Gibbons, testified all the wolves were killed in my guide area, and I forced him to be confronted on it, and only after he knew he was caught did he admit none of the wolves were killed in my guide area. The judge didn't do a thing, and guess what reason was for her sentence me for 2 years in jail and forfeiture of my guide license, $20,000 fine, taking away my airplane, was quote unquote because most, if not all, the wolves were killed in 19C where you were guiding. This is after her chauffeur had admitted none of the wolves were killed in 19C. So you don't have to fantasize about coercion or collusion. It's proven right there.
We do have a caller here, and you're on the Bird's Eye View, E-Frog.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for your endeavors, David. I, too, been through the court system, and I know what you're talking about. Fortunately, I haven't suffered as much of a grievance as you have, but I do commend you for your journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. So now you had something you wanted me to read, and we're going to take one more break. When we come back, I will do that. It is 10 degrees now on the Bird's Eye View, 351 on the 1 KSRM. Okay, David, now let me ask you, what you've asked me to read is basically a kind of a poo-poo document here by the court systems dismissing your allegations. That's what I'm going to be reading here, correct?
Yeah, and that's just, remember in court I had 9 different things. This is just one, and this shows how it was removed, I believe,
yes,
for wrong reasons.
All right, here we go. Headline says, Haeg's claims of prosecutorial misconduct and statewide corruption. Haeg alleges that he is a victim of a wide-ranging conspiracy intended to frame him in order to protect the infant wolf control program from ending in scandal. To this end, Haeg claims that the state attorneys responsible for prosecuting his case, Haeg's own attorneys, the Alaska Commission on Judicial Conduct, the Bar Association, the Public Defender Agency, and virtually every judge involved in this case have all colluded together in a vast conspiracy against him. Haeg's allegations are, for the most part, simply unsubstantiated general allegations of wrongdoing without any specificity or support in the record. We therefore agree with the district court's decision to dismiss these claims for failure to state a prima facie case for relief. That means on its face. As we explained in LeBrake v. State, courts are not required to simply assume the truth of pro forma assertions of the ultimate facts to be proved when these are not supported by specific details. And in fact, you had done exactly what they said you failed to do.
Yes. That's what I'd like you to read. The briefing that I gave the Court of Appeals, I believe, gave specific details. And I'd like you to read them. And do you mind if I come over there and just look over your shoulders? You're going, or you want me to stay here?
Stay right there.
Okay.
You probably have it memorized, right? This is a headline now, Alaska Commission on Judicial Conduct Proceedings. Haeg complained main witnesses against him, Gibbons, chauffeured, ate with Murphy, that's the Judge Murphy, correct?
Yep.
While she presided over Haeg's trial. The ACJC investigator, Marla Greenstein, the only investigator of Alaskan judges for the last 26 years, requested witnesses, and Haeg provided 4. Haeg's wife, Jackie, also went to the court for documentation, and she personally witnessed Murphy being chauffeured by and eating with Gibbons full-time during Haeg's trial. Greenstein is recorded stating complaint was dismissed. The complaint was dismissed after Murphy and Gibbons testified that no chauffeuring took place until after Murphy sentenced Haeg, and that she, Greenstein, contacted all witnesses provided by Haeg and none witnessed Gibbons chauffeuring Murphy. Your comment? You've
Well,
got the witnesses.
Yeah, the problem is every one of those witnesses is now sworn an affidavit that they were never contacted, and they all personally remember witnessing the chauffeuring. So now
So there's
you
a lie.
understand
there.
why I think they're colluding. And like I said, if you just keep reading down that thing, it gets worse and worse and worse.
Disqualification of Murphy by Superior Court Judge Stephanie Joannidis. Haeg filed PCR application and the state asked Murphy to decide it, even though one of Haeg's claims was that Murphy was corrupt. Wow. Over Haeg's objection, she couldn't decide a case against herself. Murphy was assigned. Haeg asked that she disqualify herself. Murphy refused, and Judge Joannidis was assigned to review the refusal. Haeg approached the same witnesses. By the way, legal documents leave out important connecting words. So Haeg approached some witnesses he had given to Greenstein and all swore out affidavits that no one other than Haeg had ever contacted them regarding the chauffeuring of Murphy by Gibbons, and each personally witnessed this chauffeuring during Haeg's trial and or before sentencing. Haeg found the trial record recorded Murphy joking with Gibbons about his chauffeuring her before Haeg was sentenced. Haeg presented Judge Joannidis recordings of Greenstein claiming she contacted Haeg's witnesses and none had seen them chauffeuring. Documentation from Murphy Gibbons denied chauffeuring before Haeg was sentenced. Affidavits from the witnesses that Greenstein had never contacted any of them and that each personally had seen Gibbons chauffeuring Murphy before Haeg was sentenced. So contradicting everything that they could claim.
Yeah.
Court record of Murphy Gibbons joking about the chauffeuring before Haeg was sentenced. Judge Joannidis, over Peterson's objection, said this may be a career ender for Judge Murphy. Now, Joannidis is on record for saying that.
It was the state assistant attorney general, Andrew Peterson, who said that this may be a career ender for Judge Murphy.
Okay. This allowed Haeg to subpoena Murphy, leaders, Robinson, Woodmansey, Cole, Greenstein, and Dalifka. Ordered Gibbons to be produced and scheduled a 2-day evidentiary hearing for Craig to question all witnesses and the witnesses who Greenstein falsified contacting and whose testimony she falsified. We're almost out of time, David. We're going to pick this up after the news.
Okay.
All right? And we'll continue with the David Haeg Odyssey as we come up to ABC News, KSRM Soldotna Kenai Homer. It's 4 o'clock.
Welcome back to the Bird's Eye View on KSRM. Join the conversation now by calling 283-5811. Here's your host, Bob Bird.
Bob Bird, along with David Haeg. The world has noticed something, and that is perseverance. Perseverance and the willingness to suffer. At some point, perhaps a breakthrough can be effected. The 13, 14-year-old minefield of the David Haeg case, but we've had callers and texters coming in all the time. One texter says, is there anything that your supporters can do to help? And another one thanks us for having you on the show. And another person wants to talk about finish what the ombudsman lady said a year later. I thought we had covered that, but I want to make sure. But we do have a caller on the line. And Ty, thanks for calling in.
David, these were court officers that did what they did to you at the courtroom? They were officers of the court?
I believe they were, yeah. They were, most of them I think were troopers, either security troopers for the courthouse or there was one blue shirt trooper also there.
Ty, I'm going to add this, that there's a difference between security and a trooper and a bailiff. And for instance, when I was told to leave the courtroom, I asked, "Are you the bailiff?" He says, "No, I'm here to assist the bailiff." So, just how many people were officially officers of the court, I don't know.
Bob, the reason I asked that question is these are state officers, then they're accountable to the governor, are they not?
I would presume so.
Well, I'm just seeing how they can be held accountable for their conduct.
David, I seem to think that they kind of apologized for what they had to do to you. Is that, and they also admitted that you weren't fighting them or something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Later on, I actually talked to some of them when I was in jail, and they, I said, hey, I have this evidence that proves my innocence. They won't let it in, and I have a right to present it. I mean, the rules specifically say I have a right, and so yeah. And then we talked, and they said, well, we have a job to ensure courtroom security. But then when there was a probable cause hearing before a judge by phone or a magistrate, and the trooper, actually the young one that tased me, he specifically said, under no, Mr. Haeg did not try to harm anybody, did not try to do anything. And they were pretty specific that no one got hurt and that I did not try to, to.
None of them got hurt. You got hurt.
Yeah. Well, I guess that doesn't matter.
See, this whole thing is so incredibly appalling that any officer would conduct themselves in this manner. I mean, what about the next person that was going to go into that courtroom? I mean, this is just incredibly atrocious. It brings to full view what the conduct of the judicial stoops to.
Well, one of the other points...
By the arm and take you out of there. That's all they have to do.
One of the other points I'd like to make, Ty, is that the hearing had ended. So it's not like David's reading of the evidence was somehow disrupting the court procedure. The judge had left, and he turned off the recording devices. So, I mean, they could have just let David preach to the choir that was there in the gallery, and I don't know, it would have taken you hours. Then they might have had a case to say, hey, David, there's a case coming in here at, 3:30 or wherever it was, and you got to get out now. I mean, that would have been more reasonable, I think. So,
well, thank you for letting me talk to David, Bob. This whole thing is, I'm trying to find the accountability to approach the governor at this point. I nearly called him this morning while he was on the radio to address this subject, but as always, he's always really short on time on the radio.
All right, Ty, that's interesting. We'll pick that up later. And we have another caller. Bob, you're on the Bird's Eye View.
Yes, I would like to know. They also, I think, took an expensive airplane, and I think was against the law what they did, and I want to know what they did with it.
David?
Well, they did take it wrongly because I was using it for business. They were required to give me a hearing within days, if not hours. That's the law. It's actually waste versus state, and it involves a commercial fishing boat in Bristol Bay. They never gave me a hearing. They never gave me notice of a hearing, and so the whole seizure was illegal, and that was confirmed by our business attorney. Well, the airplane was kept in the impound yard, trooper impound yard next to Lake Hood, up by the Anchorage International Airport. And, and throughout, a couple years ago, they offered to give the airplane back and everything else if I agreed not to sue the state. And after all this happened, I said, no, that's not happening.
Stop right there. That's vital. They're going to give you your airplane back is basically saying we did wrong, but we're not going to admit it.
Well, it's just exactly what happened with the Fairbanks 4. We'll let you out of jail as long as you promise not to sue us. They're blackmailing people into not litigating what's really going on. They hurt you so bad that you're willing to forego outing the corruption to get back what little bit of life you may have left. And that's what's going on. Something else that's interesting is at one point when they wouldn't give me a hearing on the airplane, which they were supposed to give within days, if not hours, of seizure, I finally found that case law. I just start reading. I said, well, I'm just going to go get it. And they're like, well, you have no right. I says, you don't have a right. If I don't get due process, you don't have a right to it. Well, guess what they did? They sent me a letter. Well, actually faxed me the document, emailed it, I think maybe. that said, "We have removed it out of the troopers' locked gated impound yard to an undisclosed location." They took it out of the impound yard and hid it. Why? You tell me, Bob. I want you to tell me why the troopers would take something they claim they have a right to out of their locked gated impound yard and hid it. You tell me why they would do that.
I'm going to tell you why they would do that. Because they're afraid that you might show up with 2,000 people and just fly off with it.
Well, they should arrest me for breaking and entering or theft or whatever, but because if there was a hearing on it, I would prove I was right and they were wrong.
Bob, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, but I also wanted the state troopers to file attempted murder charges on those people, and they wouldn't do it.
Okay. Oh, you mean on the people who tased him?
Right. That's attempted murder.
Well, we talked about that last week. There's been 1,000 people killed by tasings.
That's right. Well, I know it would have killed me.
Probably me,
My
too.
heart wouldn't have took it, and I know a lot of people with heart deals that they would have died. Now, let's restrain from some of this brutality.
Your point's well taken, Bob. Thanks for calling. All right, we're going to come back here as David. We're not reading everything you want read, but I think very much so people are starting to get a very clear picture. I know you wanted to have a press conference before the hearing on December 18th. I think what we're doing here today is serving that purpose.
Yeah.
It's
can I say something? What you're reading from with, about the details that the Court of Appeals claim I never provided, that briefing is the briefing to the Court of Appeals that is located on the website Alaska State of Corruption, www.Alaska State of Corruption. There's the briefing to the Alaska Court of Appeals. You can read what they had in their hands when they then stated I didn't give any details.
We'll go back to the Midred article and kind of wrap that aspect up. And when we come back, 7 degrees now and 417 on the Bird's Eye View.
Now, more of the Bird's Eye View with Bob Bird on KSRM. Call now at 283-5811.
I want to finish up Craig Meadred's article here because this is more of a layman's encapsulating of David's case. Meadred says there's much more about all of this at the State of Corruption website Haeg started in 2009. You can exhaust yourself reading through the files linked there. But for better or for worse, Haeg is a man obsessed with clearing his name. Well, yeah. What better cause does he have? And he contends there is widespread corruption within the legal system. Well, there's no doubt that they resonate, these charges themselves. They're impossible to prove or disprove unless money changes hands, and Haeg has offered no suggestion of that. Your corruption thing is not a matter of people taking bribes. And in that regard, okay, maybe Alaska is one of the cleaner states. But there's also little doubt, says Meadred, that the legal system is by and large a community of friends and acquaintances. All politics are local. From the outside looking in, it's hard to ignore. The Alaska legal system is governed by the unwritten rules of a club. The first rule of any club is that unless you are a member, you are a nobody. The second rule is that all club members go along to get along. To directly challenge this rule as a club member, and you'll either be politely asked to leave or expelled. The recognition of this construct in the justice system has, in recent years, focused heavily on race and gender, but it goes beyond that. It sometimes is about class, in a culture that Americans like to believe is free of class. Haeg and his crowd are pretty much a blue-collar group, either by upbringing or current employment. At least 50 of them, probably more, dragged themselves to the hearing on December 18th because they thought Haeg has been a victim of injustice. More than a few came from the Kenai Peninsula, where Haeg lives. Others were from across the state. There were a significant number of Alaskan natives. A few men wore Trump hats. no matter what the national media might write. Trump's simplest political message, drain the swamp, strikes home in parts of this country. Haeg himself was alone at the attorney's table. He long ago gave up on trusting his lawyers. So it was just him, a couple of briefcases, and a box stuffed with papers. After the judge left, he said, I'm going to stay. If you want to arrest me and drag me out, that's the only way I'm leaving. And then he started to read, and minutes later he was on the floor being tased and cuffed. And then as he requested, he was dragged out. David, the charge against you is disorderly conduct?
Correct. Nope.
And do you have an attorney for that?
Nope.
Okay, and you're going to be representing yourself not only at the February 2nd evidentiary hearing. Are they going to actually go through with that? Because
everybody has kind of a misconception of what's going on. There is no evidentiary hearing. The February 2nd dates are dates by which briefing is supposed to be submitted to determine whether there's going to be an evidentiary hearing at some later date.
And only on the 5 points they're permitting.
And not even on those.
Okay.
I've got 2 or 3 points. Only if I prove things that will be almost impossible to prove will I get a hearing on all 5. And any one of the 5 are almost non-existent compared to them falsifying the map, the trooper riding around with the judge riding around with the trooper when my evidence goes missing, all this other stuff. So basically,
coercing your lawyers.
Yeah, or any of that. All of that gets wiped away. And I would like to point out or let everybody know that I started submitting evidence packets. You know, I told everybody at the hearing I had 9 items. I've now submitted or made little brief videos that we posted on Facebook, and we're getting them onto YouTube. So people with a computer, if they're on Facebook or on YouTube, can just type in David Haeg evidence packet, and I've got 3 of them out. 3 packets of the evidence that by law I should be able to litigate in an evidentiary hearing, and they're telling me no, I can't, because it, like you pointed out, it implicates the system, or however you're saying it with Medred, not the Good Old Boys Club, or
well, there's an understanding. In fact, you can't. People think, well, conspiracy, that means everyone gets together in a conference room and they plot out a course of action. But that's not necessarily what it means. It means that there are unwritten rules understood by everybody who's a member of this group, and they know that if you cross certain parameters, you'll be asked to leave.
Correct. And like I told you, my first attorney, Brent Cole, when we asked why he didn't enforce the plea agreement that we'd have given up a year guiding for at that point, he said under oath that if he would have enforced it, the state would have took it out on him and refused to make deals and would have harmed his business afterward. Did he say who told him that? Or was it something he just understood? I think at one point he said it was Scott Leaders, the prosecutor. He said the prosecutor would not make deals with him, basically make his life miserable if he tried to enforce my right to some of the, and then that's why that's why I believe we never got it. When I hired Brent Cole and we had a right to a hearing on the airplane, when we asked him, is there any, can we get the plane back? Oh, no. Chuck Robinson, every one of our attorneys, when I had a right to protest, they all said, no, you don't. There's nothing we can do about it. Basically, the prosecutor got to do whatever he wanted without protest. And the sick thing is had I been representing myself back then, I would have demanded everything. I would have said, hey, I was shooting the wolves where the state told me to. They moved all the evidence to my guide area. Hey, all the warrants seized in the planes were all falsified. I want a hearing on the airplane. I want it bonded out. All this stuff I'd have done on my own.
But you weren't a lawyer.
But I wasn't
and you trusted yours.
And I trusted my lawyers. But even if I wasn't a lawyer, even if I would have just represented myself, I would have said, hey, this is why we shot the wolves where we did. The state told me to. Hey, they falsified all the evidence locations to my guide area. That happened years before trial when they seized the airplane and searched our house. Every attorney I had knew all those warrants had been falsified, and when I asked them what they could do about the false seizure warrants, they told me nothing could be done.
Hugh's got a question.
So I'm really new on this case. I hadn't heard about it till Bob brought it up. I think last year. You said they searched your house. What was that for?
Evidence that we were shooting wolves and killing wolves outside the the wolf control area.
The whole thing.
What would they hope to find that would?
Ammo, guns, maps. They took a lot of our cameras. They wanted to see if there were pictures, computers, satellite phones.
Okay.
They seized all our guns. I had 9 pairs of bunny boots they took.
That gets into the aspect of asset seizure. What the heck do they want bunny boots for?
Well, they said where they found tracks, they wanted to see if the bunny boot tracks they found in the snow matched bunny boots
You
that I
weren't
had.
denying anything. I mean, you shot the wolves. I mean,
But when they're making their case, they seize whatever they can, and when they seize it, they just tend to keep it, and that alone forces. There's a quote from one of our founding fathers that says, "Power over a man's subsistence is power over his will." And when they took my airplane, and then took my guide career, and stuff, that's why it's 13 years down the road. They know if they just sit back and wait, they're going to win. And I think they know that with virtually anybody. Like the Fairbanks 4. They convict them, throw them in jail, and they know after long enough, even if they can prove they want were innocent, the sheer fact that they've been in there for so long and the sheer fact they want out, they can use as a bargaining chip to cover up what happened. And I think that's, a common theme.
Did you get your guns back?
No, they still have everything.
They have everything.
Yeah.
They have everything. My goodness. So Hugh, you have to understand when the piano was dropped on him, he had a helicopter and how many SUVs drive into your?
There was like 9. You'd have to talk to my wife, but there was like 9. There were federal agents. They had a turbine helicopter. They had people running everywhere in body armor. I think there were 9 vehicles. Most of them Suburbans and stuff. Turbine helicopter on the ground, and my wife and my daughters were just babies, like 1 and 3 years old at the time, scared to, and after that happens, you're just like, you're just like
the overwhelming power of the state.
Yeah, you're in shock.
You're in shock.
Yep.
There are renegade guides, people who land and shoot the same day because they've spotted a moose. And can you tell me how many are legitimate renegade guides are caught? I mean, with your reputation, that's one of the reasons why they contacted you. And it seems like a betrayal because you were on first name basis with many of the Fish and Game people, and they were friends of yours.
Yep.
So we're running out of time here. ABC News coming up at the bottom of the hour. 7 degrees now on the Bird's Eye View.
Now, more of the Bird's Eye View with Bob Bird on KSRM. Call now at 283-5811.
David Haeg said he liked Wayne Gretzky's quote, which was, "You miss 100% of all the shots you don't take."
It's a good one.
It's a good one. Bob Bird along with Hugh Nelson, David Haeg, as we are doing the best we can to make things short and simple of what something cannot really sometimes be short and simple, but we are making great progress, I think, here today, David. I'm going to finish Craig Madrid's article here, and we'll bring closure of your time in our program here. Before we reach the top of the hour, of course, we'll take calls at any time. So whether the tension in the courtroom, and they're discussing after you were thrown to the floor and tased, whether the tension in the courtroom distorted time then or the video now, I can't say. What can be said is that those in the courtroom were angry, many of them very angry. Their shouts said it all. There was a lot of profanity and more. They're killing him. Excessive force. You must be ashamed to be troopers in this state. The reactions were not unlike those from crowds of Black Lives Matter. It was hard to ignore the sense that the gap between the American ruling class and the American working class is ever widening. This is a complicated, ugly case, Haeg told friend Tim Toohey after he was dragged away. It's also a case that's dragged on too long, a case that's floated around the court system for 13 years because judges see enough in Haeg's accusations to keep the case alive, but not enough to want to rock the system. Haeg appeared Monday to be a man pushed to his limit, but The end result is that he's now charged with disorderly conduct and so forth. But David, you are a bantam. You're back on your feet. You've proven you can take it. You can take the blows, and you're a cork. It will not stay down below the surface. It keeps popping up. And at some point, David, they're going to probably offer you something that's more than what you have so far. But is it possible? Is it possible to get this corruption cleaned out? Or if you've been offered some sort of relief, you've refused it. Is it possible to straighten this out? What's necessary?
Well, we have met with our state senators and representatives, and Senator Mike Chenault had, without a doubt, the best solution of all. And he said we need an independent commission to publicly investigate. And I looked into what that meant. And the best example people could Google is called the Mullen Commission in New York City of allegations and proof of police corruption. And in that commission, after they did their investigation, they basically said, like we've all agreed, is that when entities police themselves, like the Commission on Judicial Conduct, the judges,
it can't work.
It does for a while, and then it becomes corrupt after too many years. And basically, they say in New York City, it goes on about 20-year cycles of corruption. It gets cleaned up because they have an independent commission that goes in and that commission needs to subpoena people, have the power to subpoena, and then also the power to grant immunity. So when somebody comes in and says, well, I'm not going to testify, they can say, well, we're granting you immunity from being prosecuted, and now you will explain who told you what and who you were working with and how all this happened. But the final solution for all of us, not just me, everybody else that has a problem, is an independent commission to publicly investigate. And in Ted Stevens' case, I think it was Judge Emmett Sullivan appointed an independent investigator, and I think he was a lawyer, but he was on the East Coast. And he's the one who they gave him some money, and he hired some investigators and put it all together. And that's how what happened to Senator Ted Stevens came out. They had to have an independent investigator because the judge on record said, we can't have an internal investigation of, the Department of Justice because they will just steer it where it looks good for them. And that's what needs to happen here. And like I said,
let's stop it right there, because that bears repeating. It's got to be an independent investigator, because if it's an internal investigation, they will make themselves come out of it.
Yep. And, like with Marla Greenstein, the only investigator of judges, just think how many judges she could get to quash any subpoena requiring her to testify. Just imagine it. For 28 years, she's been doing the investigations. Like Judge Murphy, like my trial judge. Do you think that Marla Greenstein could get a motion to quash her subpoena from Judge Murphy? I mean, and that's how it will go. And I'd also, I guess, like to express my appreciation for Senator Peter Micciche, who has started helping me with this.
Now, he's going to have a little get-together tonight. Is that open to the public?
I don't know.
Okay. Never mind.
So I just wanted to say that he, before this hearing, before it really got out, he called me on his own personal time, I think during his birthday, and said, we have to do something. And he said, our goal is to make sure you get a full and fair evidentiary hearing on all your issues, not the issues that other people want to tell me I can litigate. And again, I just want to point out to everybody, the reason why I was so adamant in court is they're telling me what I can litigate, not what I want to litigate. And so it's not my hearing. I mean, if, I can say, hey, Bob, we're going to give you the hearing you want, but it's going to be about whether, Dave Brummel here is, supporting your cause. Well, if you don't get the hearing on what you want it to be, it isn't your hearing.
And in the meantime, time goes on, your expenses go on, and justice delayed is justice denied.
Yep, I believe that wholeheartedly.
David Haeg needs prayers. David Haeg needs prayers. If you really want to know what you can do to help him, David Haeg needs prayers. With that in mind, David, let's once again talk about your website before we close things here. thestateofcorruption.com, is it?
It's really, that's kind of almost archaic or a dinosaur. Where we've really been having information move fast is through Facebook. And we've got a Facebook page, Alaska State of Corruption. We started another group that people can join called Stop Alaska's Judicial Corruption. It's also on Facebook. So anyway, I would, anybody that's interested in this, I'd encourage to become, a member of Facebook, and then the information travels instantly. When something happens, I post it, your phone beeps, you look at it, wow. Where on the website, you have to get to a computer, you got to go there, you got to read. And so even though I have a hard time with it, Facebook and social media is a wonderful thing.
And of course it is. It's a double-edged sword. That's the problem.
Yeah.
All right. David Haeg, Godspeed, good luck, and may 2018 be better for you than 2017.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me again on your program.
You'll be back, I'm sure, and we'll see what the status will be at that time. It is 7 degrees now on the Bird's Eye View on the 1 KSRM.